right, I am live. Let me set a title here and then we will get started. Good day, everybody. Good day, good day. All right, just hella close. Mad close. That's very bright. Okay. Let me set a title really quickly and then I'll get started. All right, today we're talking about respectability. And things. Okay, cool. Now, can I make that a thing? Can I pin that? Oh, is it pinned? Oh, I think it's pinned. Okay, cool. So, mad bright. I apologize for the brightness. But, hella close. Okay. Very bright, very close. What are we gonna do about it? Anyway, welcome everybody. I'm gonna get started. It's 1:01 p.m. And here we are again, blessed to see another Saturday. All right, so we're gonna get started. If you join in late, you'll join late, and that'll be okay. All right, no biggie. All right, cool. So I'm just trying to get my camera right. All right, hello everyone. Okay, so welcome to the Caribbean Scholars Thing Instagram. Today is June 27th of 2020. I'm your host, Kat J. Stevens, and I'm a full-time PhD student in a nice, friendly field like education. So how did I get here in front of you today? I'm a Caribbeanist that happened to fall into education, and through that, CST was started. So before we start, just a few housekeeping items. As you know, the new time is 1 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Every Saturday I will be here, barring some like epic madness in the world, right? Which we do not hope for. But the lives, of course, will be saved, and I'm, kind of creating a library of such so that folks can go ahead and go back to them. I'm seeing that some folks are able to watch later. So some folks have been joining live every week, and a lot of people have been watching after the live. So whatever way you're getting to this, whatever way you're finding this, thank you for watching. Thank you all for sharing with your communities, because I see people sharing the lives as well. So thank you for doing that. Please keep that up. We're building a thing right here. So just so you know, structure wise, what you can expect, I'll share my notes, my thoughts. I'll share ideas with you. Some will not be my ideas, some will be other ideas of other scholars that I'm highlighting. And you can interface in the comments as you wish. I would hope for this to be interactive, and if you have any questions at the end, please feel free to add them. Okay? So I just want to remind folks that Caribbean Scholar Tings welcomes all of our island brilliance. Please join the conversation. Degreed up or not, this is our birthright. Reasoning belongs to us. So last week, I left the conversation talking a little bit about slave revolts, right? And slave rebellions. And I said I was going to go into respectability just a wee bit. But of course, 30 minutes is not enough to cover any particular topic. So today I'm going to be talking about respectability just a little bit. As you can see back there, there's my home flag. And so please keep Guyana in your prayers right now. We have a lot going on politically, and it's a very intense time. Okay, so as I said last week, we talked about slave rebellions and slave revolts, and was intending to go into respectability, but there was not a lot of time for that. So today as well, I'm going to go back to respectability from several different kind of entryways, and this is all the way that I am looking at respectability. This is all the way that I am putting respectability together, okay? And so with that, I want to talk about respectability today and how it shows up in our life, how it shows up in a Caribbean context. And so for me, I have a little anecdote before I dive into some of the literature that I found. And this is the way that I bring it together. Okay. So for me, I have a Guyanese father. Okay. And he has a very particular name. His name is Cecil. Cecil. Very simple. Cecil, some people say, or Cecil, some people say. But I want you all to think about anecdotally, what are your parents' names? What are your grandparents' names? Think about that. And so it's just a little thing to a nugget to keep in the back of your mind about respectability and naming. Naming is very important in a lot of ways. Let me go into why respectability. I started this dialogue every week now to be able to hold space for us to talk about the things that impact us as Afro Caribbean people, um, and how we can see ourselves in the battle for racial justice and all the things that's happening today. How we can see where we fit in. And for some folks, they think about it, and some folks don't think about it. Wherever you fall on that scale, this is an opportunity for me to just put some ideas in the universe and let them stay there. And you can engage with them as you wish. So, every week is building upon the prior week. So, if this is your first time watching, please go ahead and watch the prior weeks and you'll see where I'm taking us every week. So I'm starting with a very important text, which is called um, Black Identities, West Indian Immigrant Dreams, and American Realities. This was written by sociologist Mary C. Waters, who happens to be a white woman. And this text was written in 1999. She did a wonderful job of interviewing so many Caribbean folks in New York City and came up with this beautiful text that I've used in my research and across the years. So I just want to kind of paint a picture of a couple of things. This topic is important to me, and I think about it in relation to socialization of the immigrant, of the Black immigrant, especially those coming from the Caribbean. Thinking about how we adapt to native born Americans, understanding of being American, how we integrate. I'm thinking about how we move in an American space and context, how we arrive at a well being. Are we better off? Generally, the second generation tends to be a bit better off than the first generation. There's a bit of benefit there. Um, and I'm gonna come back to respectability, but I want to paint a picture for like what folks that are immigrants and children of immigrants may experience, so that once you understand something that may experience that we experience, um, thinking about respectability and how it shows up will probably be a little more clear. So three areas that were found by Dr. Waters includes health impacts among the Afro Caribbean community. Hey, morning or afternoon. And so, health impacts, the longer you're in the US, you become a little bit more unhealthy. By the third generation, all of the positive things that go into, that we hold on to, all of the things that matter to us about keeping our, keeping our food, keeping our particular ways of being from our home countries, they get tossed away by the third generation. And so we tend to be impacted by health choices differently as we move on in generation and not positively at all. Crime, we see that immigrants can be better off in the beginning compared to native black folks in the US. But then we see by the second generation and the third generation, crime rates do go up and they resemble native born Americans in this respect. So the gap decreases and become neck and neck as far as crime. So also, it's important to think about Black immigrants immigrate. How do we integrate? We integrate at a slower rate than others. Poverty rates can go up slightly, And we see this happening by the second gen and the third gen. I myself, for example, would be considered a first gen, as I am an immigrant from Guyana. And so myself, my siblings, my parents, we would be considered first gen as we came here to the US. Also, thinking about undocumented folks in the population, because it's important to know that immigration does not belong to Latinx folks only. It doesn't. It belongs to all of us, and we are deeply, deeply, deeply rooted in situations that happen with folks that have documentation, that have different documentation. DACA also affects us all, which is a side note, but I wanted to make that point. So, we see that the refrain is often that folks come to this country to work, to make a better life. And so we have a high labor rate inclusion by the second generation and the third generation. Poverty does go down, but we start out with higher poverty rates. We see that as well. So the other harmful thing is that often there's this story and this painting of an immigrant exceptionalism, and you have to be you have to be a superstar, you have to be successful to be an exception to the rule. And Mary Waters talks about this in her work as well. Often that in order to be seen as a human being and for your humanity to be really, for your humanity to be respected to a certain degree, you have to be getting into all Ivy Leagues, for example. You know those kind of silly reports that come out in the news every single spring? You see folks talking about, oh, this child of immigrants got into all 8 Ivy League schools, or this person from this small town did this or did that. Astronomical thing, right? That's for a reason. So let's think about some key words, right? Um, Colonialism, respectability, language and linguistics, the word proper. Proper irks my soul. Just saying, it irks my soul. What kind of outward measures are we taking towards respectability? And what kind of inward measures are we taking towards respectability? Mimicry. What do we think of mimicry? What do we think of assimilation? What do we think of integration? So, I want to go down to some resources that kind of help me with my framing today. First, as like I mentioned before, the text Black Identities, West Indian Immigrant Dreams, and American Realities by Mary C. Waters is a phenomenal text, although I wish it was written by a Caribbean person, but it was not. Nonetheless, it's amazing. Um, I also have something here from Dr. Jamila Liscott, who is a professor from University of Massachusetts, Amherst, comes from Brooklyn, New York, and she is a child of Trinidadian immigrants. She's an English language educator, and she has a TED Talk that has gone viral. I think it was released maybe 6 years ago, and it's entitled 3 Ways to Speak English. She starts out the she starts out the TED Talk. One thing that she says is, I'm articulate. Like she really troubles the idea of articulate, the word articulate and what it means, and that she has 3 different languages, 3 different ways to speak English. And in particular, she says, like, what's good, which is a total New York thing to do. Hey, which is a total New York thing to do, like, yo, what's good? Like, I am from Brooklyn, and I'm from Queens. I can't leave one out. But she says, Dr. Liscott says, what's good? Dr. Liscott also says, what's a guan, right? Dr. Liscott also says, hello. So 3 variations of English. So if you get a chance, put on that TED Talk. It's phenomenal. Dr. Liscott also has said publicly that the 3 variations of English that she speaks, are African American variety English, Caribbean Creolized English, and Standard American English. So I'm kind of painting this picture so that we can get into respectability just a wee bit. There's another paper by a scholar named Corey Charles Gooding. on Black immigration and ethnic respectability. A tale of two cities between New York and LA. This paper is really powerful in the sense that we know about respectability politics and, in general, where they come from. But this particular scholar talks about ethnic respectability in how it pertains to Afro Caribbeans in the community. So that's really powerful. I have a particular text that I'm going to highlight for y'all in a minute. I'm talking a little fast because there's a lot to say today. But this text right here is one of my favorite. If we see here, okay, this text is phenomenal. I don't even know when was this thing made. This thing was made, let me see. This came from UE, which is University of West Indies Press, and this was a 2010 edition. So I came across this text, which is phenomenal in the sense that it's an actual dictionary. It's called New Register of Caribbean English Usage. Richard Alsop was a retired professor of Caribbean lexicography, and a former director of the Caribbean Lexicography Program at the University of West Indies, Barbados. This book is so important. It's one of many, but this was the first one that I could find on Amazon. But this scholar right here is one of the first scholars to talk about linguistics and give name and space to Caribbean Creolized English in the field of linguistics, which is a big deal, right? Because the way that we talk is ours, belongs to nobody else. It's ours. And so this text I love because I got it this semester off Amazon. And it's so interesting because it acts as an actual dictionary, like a literal dictionary. And it has like, for example, it has the word Bamsi, if we can see. Can you see that? That is like fire. And I'm like, I got it and I was like, what in the world? Because growing up, at least for me, like there were certain words I said in the house and there were certain words I never said outside the house. And like Bamsi, what? So, it has the etymology of it, like Trinidad. Yeah, this book is phenomenal, but it's one of many. And I will say, if you can get your library to order this book, your local library, your public library, your school library, let them order this book. It is phenomenal. Because this is somewhat of an academic text, it is very expensive, as most academic texts are, unfortunately. But, like, I remember being a little kid. I'm going back into antidote right now. And, like, hearing my mother say the word dotish, right? And my mother would say dotish, she would call somebody dotish, or my sister would say somebody was dotish. And, like, I would always grow up like, what do these words mean? They don't mean anything. This is just, like, stupid language. It don't make no sense. But it took me until this big age in 2020 to find a book like this, right? And be able to see that our language has roots. Our language is ours. And like what this fellow has done for just like the dictionary. But imagine having a Caribbean dictionary. So when I write my dissertation, I'm just letting y'all know, like, this man right here is going to get mad props because, I personally have struggled to find my way with being a scholar and using my mother tongue, but also when is it appropriate? When can I use it? People want me to repeat myself. Do I have to repeat myself? It's always this thing of like, how am I going to be respectable in this room or this room and this room? And it's really a manipulation of the mind. And so, anyway, if you can get your library to order this or to order any of his books, definitely do it. But that's one scholar. And so we have another, like Caribbean folks have been writing about respectability for a long time. I have one text that's called The Struggle for Respectability, Methodism and Afro-Caribbean Culture in the 19th Century. It's a long time ago. That's phenomenal. Kay Olwig wrote that in 1969. I also have a contemporary scholar out of Toronto, Vijay Ramjatan, who does a lot of work on racialized accents and pronunciation. I want to just take us down a direction. If we're thinking about how respectability kind of popped up, and how it shows itself, Mary Waters' book, I'm going to give you the title of the book again. Black Identities, West Indian Immigrant Dreams and American Realities. Like her text really highlights what a lot of Caribbean immigrants were thinking when they migrated to New York. And so she has done a lot of work with that text and interviewed a ton of New Yorkers, Caribbean folks living in New York. And so this kind of helps explain a mindset of why respectability and how respectability is so insidious, right? And so part of her findings is that immigrants and their integration into an American economic structure is facilitated by a knowledge of English, an American English, mind you, a knowledge of English, skills and contacts that they bring with them, self respect, and an optimistic assessment of American race relations. Now, keep that in mind, that's important. She says, though, however, over time, American race relations and a positive cultural values swap places as they get a better lens of the landscape that they're living in the US. So, what impacts this? Housing discrimination, employment biases, public schools that are inferior, persistent racial discriminations. It undermines the initial whiteness that some folks come to the country being open to. And then by the second and third generation, um, we see that folks are not using, um, they're using American standards to measure success versus Caribbean standards to measure success. And so we see folks wanting to assimilate, wanting to behave differently, wanting to make sense of these two competing ways of being, a Caribbean sensibility and an American sensibility. And with that, we see that folks are going to try many different tactics to fit in, to be successful, and I'll get into that more. We see that also in her text, um, values that have garnered success for first gen immigrants, including a hard work ethic, a lack of attention to racism, a desire for education, an incentive to save, all of those things become undermined by the lived experiences of Afro Caribbean immigrants in the US. Once we get a taste of that, we see that what may work for the first gen may not work for the second gen, may not work for their children and grandchildren, as we get more acclimated to an American system that is full of racism and other untoward experiences. Now, ultimately, Waters finds that based on her research, those who resist Americanization are more likely to succeed economically, especially in the second generation and beyond. That's really important. So, thinking a little further and more particular about respectability, I'm going to the Gooding text that I mentioned earlier, and this is phenomenal to me. This is phenomenal. The Gooding chapter says that there is a dependence on identity and public consciousness for Afro-Caribbean folks, right? Um, it highlights a need to understand Black immigrant identity and politics at the same time. This is what this is all about. For me, this is what Caribbean Scholar Things is all about and how this place came to be. Um, the Gooding text also says that racial and ethnic identity are powerful motivators of how we engage politically, nationally, and on a local level. I get that, I understand that. Gooding also says a high number of, or a high visibility of Afro-Caribbean immigrants does impact how they get involved politically. Um, his findings also include that there's a particular kind of engagement that we have that is directed towards having an elevated social status, right? This occurs in New York City and LA, as there are often large numbers of Caribbean populations in either place. The Gooding text also says that there is a social context which impacts Afro Caribbean identity. Social political factors inform how Afro Caribbean people negotiate racial politics, how we make sense of strategies that we're going to need that we employ those to improve our social standing, and we employ them to improve political standings once we migrate to the U.S. Now you can interchange the U.S. for Canada or the UK in this sense, right? And I would guess that. Although the particular article I'm referencing, his research is based out of New York and LA. Okay? So he complicates, this is the good part, he complicates respectability politics in this way. Like, he understands respectability politics to be a uniquely African American strategy that is used to navigate racial structures. So he's using a sense of respectability politics as it is something that African Americans use to navigate racial structures. But he's not deploying respectability politics to Afro Caribbeans. He is instead deploying something that he calls ethnic respectability. What is ethnic respectability? I find it fascinating. So I may go over by a few minutes, but according to him, what he has coined as ethnic respectability is an effort to distance yourself and to distance the group from racial stigma, to improve your social political standing, and to insulate the group from structural racism. The end goal of ethnic respectability is to be used as a strategy to elevate the group into the public consciousness. And this public consciousness is what propels Afro Caribbeans to step out and hold on to what they want to maintain, which is whatever they're maintaining from back home that they see may serve them well in a new environment, but also to differentiate themselves from other Black groups in the US more broadly. Now, I'm not here to say whether it's right or wrong. I'm here to say it's what it is. I'm here to say it's what it is. So and I'm going to go back to something anecdotal. Like I shared in the beginning of this episode, my father's first name is Cecil. And like a good Guyanese man about to be 80 years old named Cecil talks like he just left Britain yesterday. That's how my father talks. Like, my father talk like he just got off British Airways yesterday. My father was born in Guyana. My father was not born nowhere else, right? But why does my father talk like he like, oh yes, this is my daughter, her name is Kat. And like, my father talks like he has 5 accents going on at one time, but it's all pointed towards the queen. I'm wondering if you're watching this and if you'll watch it later, have you seen something like this in your family? You have folks that like talk funny, that really talk like they're still, like colonized by the British. Like, I want to know what's up with that. So respectability politics. The whole point of me doing this particular episode today is to really show that, yes, your aunt, listen, my father, Cecil goes off. Cecil is, like, has this amalgamation of this, like, weird accent. And I'm like, Dad, why you talk like that? Why do you talk like that? Like, I don't understand. Your dad hates that she talks to hide her accent. I don't know if my dad talks to hide his accent or if he talks to put on another accent. My father has never really traveled outside the U.S. too much. Like, yes, he came from Guyana, but he traveled inside the U.S., right? But he's not like this world traveler that like goes everywhere. Yet and still Cecil talk like he got cotton in his mouth. And I would like laugh because I'm like, what is he saying? Why is he saying it like that? I know he didn't talk that way when he first came to the US. I know he didn't talk that way when I was a child. But Cecil today talk like he got a stiff upper lip. So I'm saying this and I'm making light and I'm making jokes because I can make jokes of my dad, but he talks like, hey, my father talk like that. So, like many of my uncles, Winston, Cecil, um, Alexander, where we going with these kind of names? Ain't nothing wrong with Alexander. Listen, if you're named Alexander and you watch this, more power to you, right? But I'm just saying that sometimes I wonder how far back this goes and what are the silent ways that we really try to uphold respectability, to be seen as respectable, and what other measures do we take in a more overt way to be seen as respectable. And really, as we move in this world in this moment of 2020, how do we make sense of undoing some of this ingrained understanding of like respectability? Like always wearing a white stocking when I was a little girl. I had on white stockings and frilly ass socks all the time with little shiny ass shoes. Sorry for the curse words, but I did. I hated that stuff. But we wasn't going nowhere unless we were buttoned up really well. And it didn't help that my mother was a fabulous seamstress. So my mother could whip up any outfit with any fabric. My mother could do that. So I think, and I'm like talking anecdotally, but I know that we all experience this to some degree. So, next week I'm gonna be thinking about what I'm gonna talk about next week. But like your frilly white socks and patent leather shoes. Listen, ain't nothing wrong with it. Listen, I digress. If you have a little child and you putting them in frilly white socks and patent leather shoes, I tip my invisible hat to you. I just know that we were so dependent on it and clutching to certain markers of one hand fitting in and being seen as good black, and on the other hand not fitting in and holding on to I am a foreign black, whatever that means, right? I'm speaking kind of tongue in cheek because y'all family. So I'm gonna stop for today. If you have any like questions or anything, you can put it in the comments after I stop this live. But this is just really a point of something that I've been noticing, something that I've noticed a lot as I move through the world. As I am in the academy, I told y'all I'm earning this PhD, and sometimes it's gender, it's class, it's race, it's ethnicity, and they all converge at the same time. Um, I'll never go to the doctor without wearing a piece of swag from any of the universities I've attended. And on Sunday, I'll be really obnoxious and I'll wear a t-shirt from University X. I'll wear a hat from University Y. Um, I'll have a backpack on with a little pin that has University Z on it. And those are my signifiers to my healthcare provider and other people in their office that I'm educated as well. I also can call you out if I need to, and that we have something in common. Now, granted, those are trash things to do. And in the street, if somebody want to lick me down, they could go ahead and lick me down, right? But in certain spaces, there's an understanding of trying to gain a common ground in whichever way you can. And I just want to acknowledge that sometimes we do that because that's where we come from. And when you leave in a place that has been colonized by the British, and then you come to America, it's a whole cluster, it's a clusterfuck of different ideologies and different ways of being that then come together, and you have to make sense of it. You have to make sense of why you do the things you do, why we do the things we do, and how do we undo them. So I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I just wanted to tell you what I think about it. And with other scholars have written about it. And I think that's it. So I'll see you next week, 1 to 1:30 Eastern Standard Time. And if you notice something you want to hear me talk about, definitely leave a comment. I'm going to turn it off. And like I said, this is for everyone, degreed up or not. Okay, so this is our birthright. Reasoning is something that comes natural to us, and these weekly reasoning sessions are for all in the community. All right, see you guys later.